Welcome villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I am your guide, all KAGE. Thanks for all of those who commented yesterday. I will be giving you shout-outs on my next video. Here we have part 2 of What If Naruto was sent to Transformers, made by me as always. At some point I will be setting up a Patreon, for those who want to get early updates on what ifs and early releases on what ifs, as well as readying what I make. I hope you like the video we have today. Please comment video ideas, and subscribe if you're new. And without further ado, let's get into this great what if. Part 2, A Dream of Change. The sun was now setting, its bright glow fading as the day got later. The park was starting to filter out. Naruto stayed on his Camaro, its cold sleek metal embracing him as he blankly looked on. The blonde looked forward, still in contemplation of his last few thoughts, as he tried to reason with what his friend had told him to do. His car still played the encouraging music, making him wonder about what to do. More and more, the girl in front of him was getting further and further away, and he had no time to waste. Maybe Miles was right, Naruto thought, pushing himself off the hood of the Camaro. He then walked towards his door, not flint hung at his new drive. His look became focused, and his stare softened before driving off. Miles' words lingered in his mind. His friend had left, but the encouragement stayed. It reminded him of Sam a bit, and that was what made the blonde decide. He would do it. He would talk to Michaela, and take her home, using some of his own advice by staying calm and acting normal, no matter how nervous he was. As he got closer, his heartbeat started to rise in speed. He could feel it in his chest, the sound of beating in his ears as he started to sweat, although this wasn't able to be seen. As he finally drove towards Michaela, he calmed down. The hot air started to cool as if his breath could quell the heat. "Michaela," Naruto said with a voice of fake calmness, but he knew no one would be able to tell the difference. "It's me, Naruto, Witwiki," the boy said with a smile. "I was wondering if I could drive you home. People say your house is on the other side of town." Michaela didn't respond at first, her gaze fixed ahead as though he wasn't there. Naruto felt the sting of rejection creeping in but pressed on. "It would take you about an hour if you just walked." So, he let his words fall, waiting for something, if anything would come at all. Finally, Michaela stopped. She turned to him, her expression unreadable, as if weighing his offer. After a long pause, she sighed and opened the passenger door. Without a word, Michaela climbed in, and Naruto let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The two sat in silence as the car rumbled to life, the engine's steady hum filling the awkward void. Naruto stole quick glances at Michaela, searching for something, anything, to say, but nothing came to mind. Fortunately, Michaela was the first to break the silence. "I can't believe I'm here right now," she said, her voice flat, eyes fixed forward. Naruto's stomach sank at her words. A slight frown tugged at his lips, but he quickly masked it, his voice calm when he replied. "You can keep your head down if it bothers you to be seen with me. I won't take it personally." Michaela turned to him, her gaze softening just slightly, as if realizing the weight of her comment. "No, that's not what I meant. I mean, I can't believe I keep ending up like this. With guys like Trent, guys who only care about themselves." Naruto glanced at her, his expression shifting to one of quiet understanding before he refocused on the road. Her words hit him in a way he hadn't expected, but this wasn't about him. Not now. The silence crept back in, heavier this time. Naruto's mind scrambled for something to say, anything that might help. He finally let out a soft sigh, his tone gentle. "What happened with him?" Michaela turned to him, surprise flickering across her face. "Are you sure you want to hear about that? I mean, most guys don't like hearing about other guys." Naruto shrugged, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Doesn't bother me. It's better than sitting in silence. Besides, I'm gonna need directions to your house eventually, so might as well fill the time." Michaela looked towards the blonde one last time, her eyes concentrating on him for a few seconds as he sat forward. For Naruto it was like she was testing him again. He still couldn't tell what she was looking for, and he didn't know if she would find it or not, and what her reaction to it would be. The black-haired girl glanced at him for a moment, then sighed deeply, her hands clasped together in her lap. The streetlights blurred past as the hum of the car filled the space between them. "Well," she started slowly, "Trent and we've been on and off for months now. It's like the same pattern, you know? He says all the right things, makes me feel special, then everything falls apart when he acts like he owns me. I've tried to get out before, but every time he convinces me I'm the problem. And I always fall for it." Her voice cracked slightly, and she looked down, her hands tightening around her knees. Naruto kept his eyes on the road, his grip tightening slightly on the steering wheel. He had no experience with this kind of thing, but he could hear the hurt in her voice, and that was enough to make him feel the weight of it. "I don't think you're the problem," he said quietly. The whiskered boy's voice firm but gentle. He shot a quick glance at her, offering a reassuring smile, though he wasn't sure how convincing it was. People like that, guys like Trent. They don't know what they want, and they make everyone around them feel like they're the ones who are wrong. Michaela met his gaze briefly, and for a second, the tough exterior she usually wore seemed to fade, replaced by something softer. "You really think so?" Naruto nodded, a little more confident now. "Yeah, trust me. I've been around people like that before. You can't let someone control how you feel about yourself. You're better than that, Michaela." The air in the car felt lighter, even as the road stretched on between them. Michaela exhaled slowly, her posture relaxing a bit. She stared out the window for a few moments, letting the silence settle again. "Thanks," she muttered quietly, almost to herself, but Naruto heard it. He smiled a little wider, his hand resting on the gear shift as he turned onto a side street. It was a quiet drive from there, but it felt like a step forward. Each moment of silence didn't feel so heavy anymore, and for the first time, Naruto wasn't second-guessing every word he spoke. Maybe he didn't have all the answers, but he could tell Michaela just needed someone who listened. And for tonight, that was enough, as the car finally turned onto her street. Michaela spoke up, her voice softer now. "This is it," she said, pointing ahead. Naruto glanced up at the house in front of him. "You sure you're gonna be okay?" She nodded, her lips curling into a faint, almost reluctant smile. "Yeah. I think so." Naruto parked the car and turned off the engine, his heart still racing just a little from the tension that had been between them. He looked over at Michaela one last time. "Well," he said, the awkwardness returning slightly, "if you ever need a ride again, you know where to find me." She chuckled, shaking her head, but there was no bitterness in it. "Yeah. Thanks, Naruto. I really mean it." With that, she opened the door and stepped out, her figure disappearing into the darkness of the evening. Naruto watched her go, the sense of uncertainty that had been gnawing at him all day finally starting to fade. The blonde gave a small smile. He quickly turned forward. "Man, there is more than meets the eye when it comes to her." The blonde quickly paused, embarrassed by his words, and glad that Michaela wasn't here to see that. "What am I saying?" The boy drove off with that thought still in his mind. Getting home without a problem before collapsing in his bed. The day had ended quickly. Quick enough to make him tired, the first part of his weekend basically over. Sleep took over the blonde, a feeling of dread and remembrance coming over him. Although he hadn't realized it before he was already gone. Mindscape. Naruto woke up, or at least, he thought he did. A dull tiredness clung to him, heavy and unshakable, as though he hadn't rested at all. He blinked, attempting to rub the sleep from his eyes, but the feeling lingered. His surroundings came into focus, though the dim lighting made it hard to see much. Darkness enclosed him, stretching endlessly in all directions, while the walls were lined with pipes and grime. It resembled a sewer, though it was far larger and more foreboding than any sewer should be. A foul stench hit the whiskered boy's nose, acrid and sour, making him gag and stagger forward. He froze when he felt something cold and wet against his feet. Looking down, he saw himself ankle-deep in murky water, its surface too dark to discern what might be floating in it. He could only hope it wasn't what he suspected. Questions swirled in his mind, jumbled and relentless. Where am I? How did I get here? Before he could fully process his confusion, a creeping sense of dread settled over him. It wasn't just fear, it was something deeper, something eerily familiar. It tugged at his thoughts, urging him forward, drawing him toward an unseen destination. What is that? Naruto muttered, his voice echoing faintly against the damp walls. He strained his eyes, peering into the darkness ahead, but the source of the feeling remained hidden. Without realizing it, he began to move. Each step sent ripples through the stagnant water, the sound of his feet barely audible over the oppressive silence. The corridor stretched endlessly before him, the faint glow of pulsating pipes on the walls the only guide. Finally, he reached the end of the hall. Before him stood a massive, rusted gate. Its bars were twisted and uneven, as though some unimaginable force had bent them out of shape. The pipes lining the walls seemed to converge here, weaving together like veins, their dim glow pulsating faintly with an ominous rhythm. Naruto's breath caught as the oppressive feeling of dread intensified. It pressed down on him, suffocating and inescapable. Then, from beyond the gate, came a low growl. Deep and resonant, it vibrated through the air like distant thunder. The blonde froze, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. The sound seemed to seep into his very bones, primal and overwhelming. You're finally here, a voice rumbled, rough and guttural, yet strangely measured. It wasn't loud, but its weight made it impossible to ignore. Naruto's head snapped toward the gate. Who's there? Show yourself. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the unease creeping into his chest. The growl deepened, morphing into a chuckle that echoed around him. Still so loud. But not much wiser, the voice taunted. No memories, no understanding. Pathetic. A pair of glowing red eyes appeared in the darkness, staring at him with a terrifying intensity. Naruto stumbled back, his fists clenching instinctively. As the figure beyond the gate stepped closer, its shape became clear. Massive, razor-sharp teeth gleamed faintly in the dim light, twisted into a wicked grin. Behind it, 9 enormous tails swayed lazily, their movements both mesmerizing and menacing. Kyubi. Naruto whispered, the name escaping his lips as if from some buried memory. The beast grinned wider, its jagged teeth glinting in the faint light. Ah, so you're not entirely clueless, it sneered, leaning closer until its enormous face was mere inches from the gate. Its breath was hot. Reeking of something ancient and feral, Naruto fought the urge to recoil, his mind racing. The name felt familiar, as though it had been waiting just beneath the surface of his thoughts. What are you talking about? What's going on? The Kyubi laughed again, shaking the very walls of the mindscape. You're standing in your own mind, boy. And yet, you remain ignorant. I expected you to remember by now, to awaken fully. But it seems I'll have to remind you myself. Naruto's fists tightened, his fear giving way to a flicker of defiance. You're not making any sense. What memories? What am I supposed to remember? The beast's grin didn't waver. Everything, it growled, its massive paw reaching out to press against the bars. The gate creaked and groaned, as though even its ancient strength could barely contain the fox's power. As the room began to tremble, the water around Naruto rippled violently. He felt the weight of the Kyubi's presence pressing down on him, suffocating and all-consuming, but before the beast could speak again, the world around Naruto began to shift. The mindscape dissolved into a blinding white light, and Naruto's senses were swallowed whole. Suddenly, Naruto jolted up, his breath sharp and fast, not able to calm himself from the panic of what he thought had to be a dream. After a few seconds the boy's breath slowed, steadying with each intake of air. Before the boy's breath slowed started to recall what he had seen. Okay, I guess, it was a dream. The blonde moved off his bed, recalling his earlier thoughts as fiction, until a voice cracked in his head, with a boom that he was able to recognize. The boy looked around wixkly, his eyes darting to each corner of his room, before he eventually relaxed with a sigh. Not a dream, chuckled the voice of the Kyuubi, its beastly bellow unnerving Naruto just a bit. Okay, so I'm crazy now. Another mock chuckle came from the voice as the blonde grabbed a hold of his head. There was no way he was imagining this, so he had to be crazy, the blonde thought. You're not crazy, kid, you just don't remember everything. Shut up, interrupted Naruto before running towards his bathroom. Naruto slammed the door behind him, gripping the sink tightly as he stared at his reflection in the mirror. His face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. The silence of the room was broken only by the sound of his uneven breathing and the faint hum of the fluorescent light above. Okay. Get a grip, he muttered, splashing cold water onto his face. The shock of the icy water brought some clarity, but it did little to silence the voice in his head. Running won't help, you know, the Kyuubi's voice rumbled, its tone both mocking and patient, as if it had all the time in the world. Naruto gritted his teeth, glaring into the mirror as if the beast might be staring back at him. This can't be happening, he hissed under his breath. You're not real. This is just some messed up nightmare. The Kyuubi laughed, a deep, resonating sound that sent a chill down Naruto's spine. You keep telling yourself that, kid. But we both know the truth. I'm as real as you are. Naruto shook his head violently, as if trying to dislodge the voice. Why are you even in my head? What do you want from me? Want? The beast sounded amused. I've always been here. I'm just waking up because you finally did. Took you long enough, by the way. Naruto slammed his hands against the sink, the impact making the pipes rattle. You're not making any sense. Waking up? What the hell does that even mean? For a moment, the voice was silent, as if considering how much to reveal. Then it spoke, its tone losing some of its mocking edge, replaced with something almost serious. It means you're not just the clueless kid you think you are, Naruto. There's more to you, more to us. You'll see soon enough. Naruto's hands trembled as he gripped the sink tighter, his mind spinning with questions he couldn't begin to form. No, I don't care what you're talking about. You don't get to just show up in my head and start spouting cryptic nonsense like some kind of creepy fortune teller. Believe what you want, kid, the Kyuubi rumbled, humor creeping into its tone. But you can't ignore me forever. We're bound, you and I, sooner or later, you'll have to accept it. Naruto opened his mouth to retort, but a sharp knock on his door startled him. Naruto, you alright in there? Judy's voice carried through the door, her concern evident. The blonde froze, his eyes darting to the bathroom window. The darkness outside confirmed what he hadn't realized. It was the middle of the night. Yes, I'm fine. He called back quickly. Just brushing my teeth. In the middle of the night? Naruto gritted his teeth as the Kyuubi's laughter echoed in his mind. Smooth, kid. Very smooth. I thought it was morning. He yelled back, forcing an embarrassed chuckle. I'll head back to bed soon. I promise. Judy's footsteps retreated, and Naruto let out a sigh of relief, gripping the sink for support. not a dream, Kyubi teased, its laughter still rumbling in his head. Naruto groaned, rubbing his temples. Great, so I'm crazy now. You're not crazy, Kit. You just don't remember everything yet. Shut up, Naruto snapped, stomping back to his bedroom. He flopped onto his bed, staring at the ceiling as the reality of the situation sank in. He sighed deeply, forcing himself to confront the voice. Alright, fine. I'll hear you out. I still don't believe you're real, but whatever. Talk. The Kyubi chuckled, its tone smug. That's more like it. No questions until the end. Got it? Naruto rolled his eyes, his arms crossed. Whatever. Just get on with it. Good, the Kyubi began, its voice taking on a more serious tone. Naruto Witwiki, you're more than you think you are. You're the reincarnation of my best friend, Naruto Uzumaki. He started out as a loud-mouthed idiot who dreamed of being the strongest shinobi in his village. Shinobi? Naruto interrupted, raising an eyebrow. You mean ninjas? Like from Japanese lore? Yes, now shut up. I said no questions. Naruto smirked but stayed quiet. Uzumaki became a savior, the hero of his world. He ended the Fourth Great Shinobi War and became Hokage, the leader of his village. But as centuries passed, true shinobi power faded. Chakra diminished, and even his reincarnations suffered for it. The Kyubi paused, its tone softening slightly. But before his death, he and I used the power of the Sage of Six Paths to ensure that chakra, and our legacy, wouldn't die. We created this reincarnation cycle, binding our souls together. Each time, we'd be reborn, carrying a piece of the past with us. Naruto frowned, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. And awakening? He asked hesitantly. The Kyubi sighed. Awakening is when your chakra and memories resurface. It only happens when the world needs you again. This time, you were lucky to awaken. Naruto sat back, processing everything. Lucky, huh? Doesn't feel like it. You'll see soon enough, Kit, the Kyubi said, its voice giving a yawn. The world's going to need you. Whether you like it or not. Well, if all of this is true, what's gonna happen? Asked Naruto, his voice calm but shaken. He began to wonder exactly how this all would come together. And you said it yourself, I don't have all of my memories yet. How will I do anything, especially if the world needs me? Well, if all of this is true, what's going to happen? Naruto asked, his voice calm but shaky. He stared down at his hands, his mind spinning. You said it yourself, I don't have all my memories yet. How am I supposed to do anything, especially if the world needs me? Kurama's voice rumbled, steady but slightly strained. Your memories will return in time, Kit. For now, your chakra has already been activated. That means your strength, speed, and defenses are enhanced enough to keep you alive. Until you regain everything, we'll have to rely on instinct. Silence fell between them, the weight of the situation pressing down on Naruto's chest. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the rising tide of anxiety in his mind. He wanted to deny it, to chalk this all up to a vivid nightmare or some strange mental episode. But deep down, in a place he couldn't quite reach, he felt it, something stirring. Something ancient and familiar, it's real. Still, doubt lingered. He was just a teenager, a troublemaker with a reputation for pulling pranks and skipping class. Sure, he was loyal to his friends and always tried to stand up for the little guy, but the idea of saving the world? Fighting something bigger than school bullies? It felt impossible. Kurama's voice cut through his thoughts, softer this time but no less commanding. I have 2 more things to tell you, Kit. Naruto glanced up at the ceiling as if he could see the fox. Yeah? What now? First, Kurama began, a hint of tired amusement in his tone. My name is Kurama. You've earned the right to call me that, thousands of times over. I'd rather not hear you calling me the voice in your head, or the Kyuubi every time you think about me. It's annoying. Naruto blinked, the absurdity of the comment catching him off guard. Kurama, huh? Alright, fine. At least now you sound less like a cheesy ghost story. The fox let out a low chuckle. Secondly, it continued, its tone suddenly sharp and urgent, your car. It's on the move. You need to go after it. And fast. Naruto's eyes widened, his stomach dropping as the words sank in. Wait, what? What do you mean, on the move? But before Kurama could reply, Naruto was already on his feet, rushing to the window. His gaze darted to the driveway where the car had been parked, only to find it gone. Crap. He hissed, grabbing his sneakers and bolting for the door. Whatever was happening. It seemed his life had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. The blonde quickly got to the back door, slamming it open without care, his eyes widening at the sight, and it made him feel as if that was all he was doing this night. Damn it, he said sharply under his breath, already running for his car that was beginning to leave the backyard. His Camaro had been on, flashing its lights in the dark, revving its loud engine, and driving on his dad's grass. He wasn't able to take in everything. That would be more distracting than not, and with his panic, he hadn't made a sound. Aside from following his car, there was nothing on his mind. He kept his pace, following the vehicle to the main road. Somehow keeping up just by running, Naruto sprinted down the road, his breath coming in sharp gasps as his sneakers slapped against the pavement. The Camaro's taillights glowed like 2 red eyes in the darkness, and its engine growled with an intensity that didn't feel mechanical, it felt alive. Wait! Naruto shouted, his voice cracking from exertion and frustration. Stop! What the hell is going on? The car didn't stop. If anything, it seemed to accelerate, forcing Naruto to push himself harder. His muscles burned, and his mind raced faster than his legs. How was this happening? His dad's Camaro wasn't supposed to just drive itself. Kurama, tell me this isn't normal, he muttered. Half expecting the fox to laugh in his head. No, Kurama's deep voice rumbled. This isn't normal. But you should keep running, Kit. There's something strange about that car. Yeah, no kidding. Naruto snapped between breaths. The Camaro suddenly veered off the main road, cutting through a dirt path that led toward the nearby forest. Naruto didn't stop to think, he followed, his adrenaline spiking as he realized the car wasn't just aimlessly driving. It had a destination. Naruto stumbled into a clearing, skidding to a halt as his eyes locked onto the Camaro. It sat there, idling in the moonlight, almost like it was waiting for him. The car's headlights flickered twice before the engine went silent. Plunging the area into an eerie stillness, panting, Naruto cautiously approached. Okay, this is officially the weirdest night of my life, he muttered. And that's saying something. The Camaro twitched. Not in a mechanical way, but like it was alive. Its chassis shifted, metal groaning as parts began to move. Naruto froze as the entire car seemed to disassemble itself, piece by piece, folding and twisting upward. The sound of grinding metal filled the air, and before Naruto could process what was happening, the car stood up, staring at the sky as a towering robotic figure. What the hell? Naruto whispered, stumbling back, unknowingly hiding behind a rock. The robot stretched up, its bright blue optics narrowing as it tilted its head. For a moment, it just the sky, its movements surprisingly gentle for something so massive. The robot then moved its arm up. reaching out to the sky before its limbs shifted. After sounds of metal clanking and bending, a light grew from the robot's appendage, shining brightly on the clouds as a symbol, one that Naruto couldn't understand, with the only part he was able to put together being a blocky face. The robot moved its arm, its optics dimming slightly. The symbol followed its device-like arm, shifting in the clouds. And as Naruto stared to it, it was almost as if it was calling out to something or someone. This had also made him think this was possibly what the world needed him for. Naruto crouched behind the rock, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The towering robot stood motionless now, its glowing symbol shifting across the night sky like a beacon. It was both mesmerizing and terrifying, and Naruto couldn't take his eyes off it. Kurama's voice broke the silence in his head. "That is not ordinary, Kit," the fox rumbled, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "No kidding," Naruto whispered back, his voice shaking. "What the hell is that thing? It's not human. That much is clear. But beyond that?" Kurama hesitated, as though even he wasn't sure. "You may want to stay hidden. For once." Naruto frowned but didn't argue. Something about the robot's movements wasn't hostile. But it wasn't exactly comforting either. It was like watching a wild animal. One wrong move, and everything could go sideways. The robot's head turned slightly, its optics scanning the clearing. Naruto's breath hitched as the bright blue gaze swept dangerously close to his hiding spot. He pressed himself lower behind the rock, his heart in his throat. The machine didn't linger. Instead, it refocused on the sky, raising its arm again. This time, the light from its appendage grew brighter, the symbol expanding and shimmering with an almost ethereal glow. "What's it doing now?" Naruto muttered under his breath. "Signaling," Kurama said grimly. "Calling for something, or someone. And judging by its size, I doubt it's summoning a picnic." Naruto's fingers dug into the dirt. His mind raced with questions, but he couldn't afford to move, not yet. The robot seemed intent on its task, unaware, or uninterested, in his presence. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the clearing. The same one that had come with the Camaro's change. The blonde's eyes locked back on the robot, its form changed back to his unassuming old vehicle, and without a clear second thought, that could be read by the boy, it had drove off, most likely back to his home, leaving Naruto unnoticed and confused. Naruto remained crouched behind the rock, his breath still uneven as the Camaro. "No." The robot shifted back into its vehicle form with a seamless grace that left him speechless. The rumbling sound of its transformation faded into the stillness of the night, replaced by the low hum of its engine as the car idled for a moment. Naruto could only stare, his mind spinning. "What the hell just happened?" he whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. Kurama's deep voice rumbled again in his mind, laced with equal parts intrigue and annoyance. "It's leaving. But this isn't over, Kit. Not by a long shot." The Camaro's headlights flickered briefly before it turned and drove off, disappearing into the trees with surprising speed and precision. Naruto's jaw tightened as he watched the taillights vanish into the distance. Heading back toward the direction of his house, the clearing fell silent again, save for the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. Naruto sat frozen for a moment, trying to make sense of what he'd just witnessed. "Kurama, tell me you've got some kind of explanation for this," he said, finally breaking the silence. "No explanation, just a warning," Kurama replied. "That thing isn't human, and it's not ordinary tech either. Whatever it is, it's far beyond anything you've dealt with before. You'd better be ready." Naruto let out a shaky breath, standing up and brushing dirt off his knees. "Yeah, because I'm so ready for giant robots that turn into cars. Totally prepared for that." Sarcasm aside, a part of him knew Kurama was right. Whatever that robot was, it had just introduced a whole new layer of weird into his already chaotic life. And something told him this wasn't a one-off encounter. Turning back toward the path home, Naruto broke into a jog. He needed to get back before his parents noticed he was gone, or worse, before the Camaro did something else to raise their suspicions. As he ran, his thoughts swirled. If the car, no, the robot, was capable of transforming like that, what else could it do? And why did it seem so deliberate, like it had a purpose beyond just escaping? For now, though, he pushed the questions aside. He'd have to deal with them later, after some sleep. If he could manage it. Once the blonde woke up to sunlight spilling through his window, warm against his face, he stretched and rolled out of bed. The lingering questions from last night nagged at the back of his mind, but he shoved them down. He needed to focus on the day ahead, not whatever that was. As he washed up, he caught his reflection in the mirror. His pajamas stared back at him, a detail he didn't remember slipping into. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe it had all been a dream. But Kurama's rasp cut through his thoughts, dragging him back to reality. Nope, it happened, all of it. By the time the blonde stepped onto his balcony, his mind was already spinning. His eyes narrowed as they landed on the car below. He didn't want to examine too closely, it would be a problem if that thing found out what he was doing, but he made sure to note anything that could be considered out of place, such as the way its rusted metal still shined as if brand new, or perhaps, the way its cracked windows had been easy to see out of from the inside. Kurama's voice broke the silence. Sitting around isn't going to get you any answers. Not talking to it either, Naruto muttered, shaking his head. No way was he about to chat with a car. That was crazy, even for him, Kurama sighed. You're really going to ignore this? Yup, the boy replied, pulling on his jacket. Not my problem, breakfast, now that's my problem. Kurama grumbled in disappointment as Naruto stepped outside, pretending he couldn't hear the fox's protests echoing in his head. Naruto quickly moved to the sidewalk, calmly moving on from what could all be dismissed as fiction. The blonde walked down the quiet street, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. The early morning sun painted the world in warm light, making everything seem deceptively normal, but his mind screamed otherwise. You know it's following you, right? Kurama growled, his voice tinged with irritation. That yellow car hasn't stopped tailing you since you left. Naruto's lips pressed into a thin line. Let it follow, I'm not getting involved. The low rumble of an engine trailed behind him, constant but unthreatening. Naruto focused instead on the rustling of the trees, trying to convince himself that life hadn't veered wildly off course. It's speeding up, Kurama said again, his growl growing more impatient. Naruto glanced over his shoulder briefly, catching a glimpse of the yellow Camaro rolling slowly behind him. It's just some junker trying to keep up, not like it's gonna abduct me or anything. Kurama's deep laugh echoed in his head. You sure about that? Might be planning it as we speak. Naruto's step faltered for just a moment. Irritation flashing across his face. Real funny, furball, what do you want me to do? I say bolt, fastest way to lose it, Kurama suggested, the amusement clear in his tone. Naruto shook his head. And have it chase me? Yeah, no thanks. I'm not looking for trouble. Kurama growled low, but Naruto ignored him, determined to act like nothing was wrong. Rounding a corner, Naruto spotted Michaela sitting on a park bench, her leather jacket slung over the back of it. She was hunched over a sleek black bike, tools scattered around her as she fiddled with the chain. She glanced up as Naruto approached, raising an eyebrow. You always talk to yourself, or am I just catching you on a weird day? Naruto blinked, realizing he'd been muttering out loud. Weird day, he admitted, scratching the back of his head. Michaela smirked but didn't press further. What's up? You look distracted. Before Naruto could answer, the familiar rumble of the yellow car grew louder, pulling into the lot near the park. The Camaro rolled to a stop, its engine idling quietly as if waiting. "You know someone driving that thing?" Michaela asked, nodding toward the car. Naruto was about to respond when the sharp sound of screeching tires pierced the air, cutting off his words. Both he and Michaela turned their heads, eyes locking onto the source. The blonde's Camaro, a vehicle he had been hoping to ignore, was somehow right on his tail. Its engine revving louder than before, Naruto's heart sank. "You've gotta be kidding me," he muttered under his breath. "Wait, that's your car?" Michaela asked, her brows furrowing as she looked between him and the approaching vehicle. Naruto didn't answer. His instincts screamed at him to move, and he obeyed, bolting down the street. His sudden sprint caught Michaela off guard, and she watched him for a moment, her expression a mix of confusion and suspicion. Before grabbing her bag and following after him, Naruto dashed toward the nearest overpass, the sound of the Camaro's roaring engine growing closer with every second. He knew the underpass well. It wasn't the most glamorous hiding spot, but the maze of pillars and shadows could buy him some time to think. "Why are we running from your own car?" Michaela shouted as she caught up to him, her frustration evident. "It's complicated." Naruto shot back, his feet pounding the pavement. "Just trust me on this." The Camaro was relentless, following them with an almost predatory precision. Naruto veered toward the shadows under the overpass, hoping to lose the car in the tight spaces. He skidded to a stop behind a thick concrete pillar, his breath coming in short bursts. Michaela was right behind him, her eyes wide with a mixture of adrenaline and bewilderment. "Okay, what's going on?" Michaela demanded, her voice low but firm. Naruto pressed his back against the pillar, trying to catch his breath. "I'll explain later. Right now, we..." Before he could finish, the screech of tires echoed once again. A black and white police car rolled to a halt just outside the underpass, its engine rumbling ominously. The vehicle's flashing red and blue lights cast eerie streaks along the concrete walls, bathing the shadows in alternating colors. For a brief moment, the tension seemed to ease, and both Naruto and Michaela let out shallow breaths of relief. "It's just a cop," Michaela whispered, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Naruto frowned, something about the situation gnawing at his instincts. The low growl of the engine sounded familiar, too similar to the unsettling sound his Camaro had made earlier. "Yeah, just a cop," he muttered, though his tone carried no conviction. The police car remained still for a moment, its headlights glaring at them like unblinking eyes. Then, with a sudden jolt, its engine roared louder, a guttural sound that sent a shiver down Naruto's spine. "What kind of cop car does that?" Michaela asked, taking a step closer to Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened as the vehicle began to shift, its sleek frame twisting and contorting. Panels slid apart with an almost organic fluidity, and within seconds, the police car transformed into the towering, menacing form of a sleek robot, not just a cop. Naruto breathed, his voice barely audible over the metallic clanking of the transformation. "Run!" Michaela screamed, grabbing Naruto's sleeve and yanking him back toward the deeper shadows of the underpass. The car-turned robot's glowing red optics locked onto them, and it bared sharp, jagged teeth in a mechanical snarl. "Humans! Hand over the glasses!" It boomed, its voice reverberating like a thunderclap through the underpass. Naruto stumbled, nearly losing his footing, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "What glasses?" he shouted, half in panic and half in genuine confusion. Before the towering robot could respond, the roar of another engine echoed through the tunnel. Naruto and Michaela turned just in time to see the familiar yellow Camaro screech around the corner, tires skidding across the pavement. The vehicle drifted to a halt in front of them, its passenger side door flinging open with an almost urgent motion. "Get in!" Naruto yelled, already grabbing Michaela's arm and pulling her toward the car. "Are you crazy? That thing is, just get in. Trust me. With little choice, Michaela slid into the passenger seat, Naruto jumping in right after her and slamming the door shut. As soon as they were inside, the Camaro's engine revved to life. The car peeled out with a screech, its tires spitting gravel as it rocketed forward. Behind them, the monster made of metal let out an enraged roar and gave chase, his massive frame smashing through the underpass's pillars as he transformed back into a sleek police car. Naruto gripped the dashboard, his knuckles white. Okay, this is crazy, very fucking crazy. The Camaro didn't respond, but its dashboard lights flickered, and the radio crackled with static before a series of rapid beeps played. Is it talking? Michaela asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Focus. Naruto shouted as the Camaro swerved sharply, narrowly avoiding a parked truck. Behind them, police car sirens wailed, the sound growing louder as the police vehicle gained on them. A sudden jolt threw both passengers against their seats as the Camaro accelerated, weaving through the city streets with precision. Naruto turned to look out the back window and saw the thing's red and blue lights flashing ominously. He's catching up. Michaela cried. Naruto gritted his teeth. Not if this thing here has anything to say about it. The Camaro picked up speed, driving on and off-road, leaving the police car in the dust with what seemed like minimal effort. Although the monster of a car was still chasing, even if it was from far behind, it didn't seem as if they would lose it. The three ended up in an abandoned warehouse, shrouded by the thick darkness of the night. The only sounds were the faint whistle of the wind and the soft crunch of gravel beneath the tires as the yellow Camaro came to a stop under a crumbling overhang. Dust swirled in the air, caught in the faint beams of moonlight filtering through the cracks in the building. The silence felt oppressive, heavy with the weight of what they'd just escaped. Naruto sat stiffly in the driver's seat, his gaze darting from one window to the next. His hands gripped the edge of his seat tightly, his knuckles white. Michaela was equally frozen, her arms wrapped around herself as she stared blankly ahead, her breathing shallow. The blonde's heartbeat pounded in his ears like a war drum, a deafening rhythm that made it hard to think. Every small movement outside the car, the rustling of the wind, the clatter of a stray pebble, sent his mind racing. Wake up, Naruto, Kurama's gruff voice rumbled in his head, sharp with annoyance. He didn't respond. His eyes continued to scan the shadows, his body tense, his breath shallow. Snap out of it, the fox growled, his voice cutting through the fog of fear. You've faced worse than this, brat, get a hold of yourself. Naruto exhaled shakily, his movements slowing. The pounding in his chest didn't stop, but Kurama's words were enough to dull the edge of his panic. You see her? Kurama's tone softened slightly. Naruto turned to look at Michaela, who sat trembling beside him, her eyes wide with fear. I can tell what's running through that thick skull of yours, Kit. If you want to protect her, you're going to have to pull yourself together. Use the power you have. Naruto stared at Michaela for a moment longer, his breathing evening out as the tension in his body eased. He could see the fear etched across her face, the way her hands trembled as she clutched her arms tightly. She was just as terrified as he was, maybe even more, but that wasn't going to help them. He clenched his fists, his gaze hardening. The confusion, the doubt, the fear, he was done with it all. If there was one thing Naruto Uzumaki wasn't, it was a coward. He wasn't the kid who ran from a challenge, not in their sleepy little town, and certainly not now. He was the guy who stood up to bullies, who pranked teachers without flinching, and who always faced trouble head-on, no matter how ridiculous it seemed. He gave Michaela a quick glance, his voice steady despite the weight in his chest. Hey, he said softly, drawing her attention, it's gonna be okay. Her eyes flicked to his, still wide with fear, but there was a flicker of something else, a faint glimmer of hope. Naruto shifted his gaze to the darkened expanse outside the car, his lips curling into a determined smirk. "If that robot freak comes for us again, we'll be ready. I'll make sure of it." "About time," Kurama muttered, his tone begrudging but satisfied. The blonde didn't answer. He didn't need to. For the first time all night. His mind was clear, and his heart wasn't racing out of fear but with determination. The silence hung heavy for only a moment before the faint sound of an engine broke through the stillness. Naruto and Michaela's eyes snapped to the source, a police car, its red and blue lights casting eerie flashes through the darkened warehouse. It had finally caught up to them, but instead of barreling straight toward them, the cruiser rolled past the opening they had been hiding in, its movements deliberate and unsettling. It slowed to a stop off to the side, as if waiting, baiting them to make a move. Naruto's Camaro suddenly roared to life, its engine coughing out thick plumes of exhaust that echoed through the building like a warning growl. The sound was deafening in the quiet, making Michaela flinch and drawing the attention of the police car, which began to reverse toward them. Without hesitation, the Camaro lurched forward, pulling out of the shadows with a screech of tires. It rolled past the police car, only to drift sharply to the side, skidding into position to face the cruiser head-on. Naruto and Michaela exchanged wide-eyed glances, the tension in the air so thick it was almost suffocating. Whatever was about to happen. It was clear neither vehicle intended to back down. The Camaro's doors suddenly flung open, pushing the teens out unceremoniously onto the gravel. They barely had time to recover before a metallic cacophony filled the air. The sound of shifting, clashing metal echoing all around them. The old Camaro was changing again, just as Naruto had witnessed before, only this time faster, its movements more deliberate. In mere moments, the vehicle stood as a towering yellow robot, its blue optics glowing like beacons as it positioned itself protectively in front of Naruto and Michaela. Before they could react, a similar sound of transformation came from the police car. With a menacing snarl, the cruiser twisted and reconfigured itself, forming into a hulking, jagged robot. Its red optics blazed with malice as it squared off against the yellow giant. The two metallic beings circled each other, tension crackling in the air like an impending storm. Blue optics locked onto red, and the police robot's jagged teeth gleamed as it sneered, almost salivating at the chance to attack. With a loud metallic slap, the police robot's hands came together. A serrated mace unfolded from its arm, the weapon gleaming ominously in the dim light. Without hesitation, it began to swing the mace in deadly arcs while charging at the yellow robot. The yellow bot didn't back down, its movements deliberate as it braced itself for the oncoming attack. Sparks flew as the two collided, the sound of clashing metal ringing out like thunder. Amid the chaos, neither Naruto nor Michaela noticed a smaller robot ejecting from the police robot's chest. It landed with a metallic thud and immediately set its sights on the humans. Naruto's instincts kicked in as the giant robot scuffle came towards him. He rolled to the side just in time, narrowly avoiding the giant foot that slammed into the ground where he had been moments before. Dust and debris flew everywhere, the sheer force of the impact rattling him to his core. The blonde didn't spare a glance at the ongoing battle between the large robots. Sparks and shrieks of grinding metal filled the air, but Naruto's focus was entirely on Michaela. She stood frozen in fear, her wide eyes locked on the chaos around her. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, determination flooding his features. He sprinted toward her, dodging another giant metallic limb as he closed the distance. Without hesitation, he scooped Michaela into his arms, carrying her bridal style as he moved them out of the immediate danger zone. "It's going to be okay," Naruto assured her, his voice calm but firm as he glanced up at the towering robots locked in combat. "I shouldn't have gotten you involved in this, but now that you are, I swear I'll keep you safe." The blonde kept moving, weaving through the wreckage and debris. His resolve was unshakable, even as the sounds of battle roared behind him. Whatever this was, whatever these machines wanted, it wasn't going to claim Michaela, not as long as he had anything to say about it. Michaela glanced up at him, her cheeks faintly flushed. At first, her expression seemed unsure, as if she couldn't quite believe what was happening, but then her confusion shifted into a sharp glare. "I don't need your protection," she snapped, her voice cutting through the noise. "Put me down." Naruto stumbled slightly, caught off guard by her words. "What?" he asked, incredulous. "I'm trying to help here. I can run on my own," Michaela protested, squirming in his grip. "I don't need to be carried around like some helpless princess." Naruto groaned in frustration, skidding to a stop behind the cover of a crumbling pillar. He set her down carefully, shaking his head. "Fine. But can we at least agree not to argue while there are giant killer robots trying to flatten us?" Michaela brushed herself off, fixing him with a determined look. "I'm not arguing, I'm just saying I can handle myself. You don't need to play hero, okay?" Naruto opened his mouth to respond but froze as the ground shook violently beneath their feet. He turned his head just in time to see the yellow robot, skidding back across the battlefield, sparks flying as the police robot advanced on him, mace raised high, Naruto's fists clenched instinctively. His heart pounded, not out of fear this time, but out of frustration. "Why do I always end up in messes like this?" Kurama's voice rumbled in his head, sharp and impatient. "You can't keep running, kid. Look around you, these things are stronger and faster than you. But that doesn't mean you're useless, you've fought worse before." Naruto mentally nodded, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the smaller robot that had emerged from the metal monster. It moved with an eerie precision, crawling and scurrying across the ground like a mechanical predator. Its glowing red optics scanned the area, and it seemed to sniff the floor as if tracking their scent. "That thing's hunting us," Naruto thought grimly. He tightened his fists, his mind racing. The small robot was fast, and from the way its limbs flexed and shifted, it could probably transform into something inconspicuous, a piece of tech that could easily hide in plain sight. Naruto's jaw tightened. "If that thing's looking for us, it's a problem we need to solve now," he thought. Kurama growled approvingly. "Good. Stop thinking like prey. It's dangerous, but you've taken down plenty of enemies that looked impossible at first glance. Time to make a move." Naruto glanced back at Michaela, who was crouched behind a chunk of debris, her eyes wide with fear. He knew they couldn't outrun the big ones if this scout called for backup. And if it could transform and hide, they'd never see it coming. He took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "Guess it's time to see if this thing can handle a little ninja ingenuity." Without warning, Naruto darted out from his cover, staying low to the ground as he moved. He kept his eyes locked on the small robot, noting its every movement. "What are you doing?" Michaela hissed, her voice sharp with alarm. Naruto didn't respond, he had no time to explain. He darted toward the robot. It snapped towards him, its optics narrowing as it watched closely. "It sees me, good," Naruto thought, a small smirk tugging at his lips. The small robot lunged, its metallic limbs clinking and whirring as it charged at him. Naruto stood his ground until the last possible second, then sidestepped sharply, swinging the piece of metal with all his strength. Naruto let his arm out, instincts tugging at his head, something he had felt ever since they had arrived. A faint blue glow surrounded his hand, giving off faint sense of power. Such a thing didn't make the robot that was charging the blonde falter, instead it kept rushing as something new began to form. The blue energy started to swirl, and his whisker marks seemed to twitch, his stride strengthened, and once the two figures met each other, inside Naruto's hand was a blue energy ball, of swirling force. Naruto's focus sharpened, his vision tunneling on the approaching robot as adrenaline surged through his veins. The faint blue glow around his hand grew brighter, the energy swirling faster. Pulsing with an intensity that seemed to synchronize with his heartbeat, Naruto waited until the very last moment, his muscles coiled like a spring. Then, with a sharp pivot, he sidestepped the attack, raising his glowing hand in one fluid motion. Now, the swirling ball of energy in his palm compressed into a sphere, radiating with sheer force. With a sharp yell, Naruto drove the Rasengan into the robot's torso. The impact was immediate and devastating. A loud boom echoed through the air as the Rasengan unleashed its power, tearing through the robot's metal body with ease. Sparks flew in every direction, and the small machine emitted a guttural screech before its frame crumpled. Pieces of it scattering across the ground, Naruto stumbled back, his breathing heavy, the glow in his hand fading. The remains of the robot twitched on the ground, its red optics flickering before going dark. What the hell was that? Michaela's voice cut through the chaos, a mix of awe and panic. She stepped out cautiously, her wide eyes darting between Naruto and the destroyed robot. Naruto turned to her, still catching his breath. "Something I haven't done in a long time," he said, his voice steady despite the situation. Michaela stared at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "Are you even human?" Naruto smirked faintly, wiping the sweat from his brow. "That's complicated. Look, I'll explain later, but right now, we've got bigger problems." As if to punctuate his point, the sound of metal grinding against metal echoed behind them. Naruto turned his head sharply, his eyes narrowing as he saw the larger robot, the one disguised as a police car locking its glowing red optics onto them. It let out a low, guttural growl, stepping forward menacingly. Its jagged mace gleamed in the faint light as it swung it experimentally at him. But before it could do anything, it was grabbed by the yellow robot, and thrown into the building. The giant rushed at the police vehicle turned monster, its blue optics narrowed even more, its metallic face clenching just a bit. It then punched its enemy down, one hit after another. They came like a shower, before the yellow robot grabbed the monster and threw him again, and as if he directed his assailant in the right spot, the yellow robot's arm transformed into a cannon, and with one blast, the monster was destroyed. Naruto would have smirked if he wasn't left in awe. His voice caught in his throat as he motioned for Michaela to follow him toward the Camaro. Once they reached it, the robot stood tall above them, its massive frame exuding a strange sense of pride. With its fists on its hips and blue optics glowing softly, it almost seemed triumphant. Blue eyes met blue optics, blonde hair reflected in yellow paint. Michaela hung back a bit, crouching slightly as Naruto stepped forward. "What are you doing?" she whispered sharply, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Naruto turned his head slightly toward her before returning his gaze to the towering robot. "It saved us." Michaela nearly deadpanned, irritation seeping into her voice. "That doesn't mean you go up and talk to it. Did you not see the robot death match it just had?" I think it wants something from me," Naruto said, his mind flashing back to the cryptic words of the earlier mechanical monster. Michaela's brows furrowed in confusion. "What?" she whispered, half yelling. Naruto ignored her bewilderment, his full attention fixed on the robot. "I heard you talk before," he called out, hoping it could understand him. The robot's radio began to crackle, cycling through stations before piecing together fragments of songs and podcasts to form words. "I hear you loud and clear," it replied, though its voice was jumbled and slightly garbled. Naruto tried not to grin, finding its radio speak oddly fascinating. "So, last night, that thing you did, was that some sort of signal?" he asked, his voice steady. The radio shifted again, patching together more phrases. "A message for Starship, signal, telling them to rain down like angels from heaven, hallelujah." The robot raised its bulky arm, pointing toward the sky as if to emphasize its words. Michaela took this moment to chime in, her tone softer but still curious. "So, are you like an alien or something?" In response, the robot pointed at her briefly, its gesture clear enough, before shifting back into its Camaro form with a fluid transformation. The passenger door opened by itself, and the radio crackled again. "Any more questions you wanna ask?" Michaela couldn't help but giggle, the absurdity of the situation finally breaking through her earlier nerves. She turned to Naruto with a questioning look. "We're not seriously getting back in that thing, are we?" she asked, her eyes twitching slightly as she struggled to process everything. The blonde just gave a smirk. "I thought you could handle yourself." That's it for today. I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe, and comment ideas if you can, and maybe you could share this with your friends, because you never know, they might like what ifs too. So without further ado, all KAGE, out.